Welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard. I'm your host, Kev. You can follow me on Twitter at dynasty_goat. And with me tonight, as always, is my co-host, Matt, who you can follow on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. Good evening, Matt.
Evening, Kev. How are you, mate?
A little bit stressed. It's been a strange couple of days. Broke the door handle on my washing machine last week. It's not been ideal. Has your last couple of days been better for you?
Yeah. I've had quite a good few days. My light bulb just got in my office, so I look like I'm sat in a cave. But apart from that, yeah, all good.
Yeah, it's not the first time I've been called a caveman, I guess, being from South Yorkshire.
Cheeky. That's very cheeky, Kev.
Yeah, for anyone that don't know South Yorkshire, it's a really nice place, full of people that we'd call salt of the earth. But
I'll take that. I'll take
good bunch of folk, us Yorkshire people. So on today's show we'll be recapping the second wave of free agency and the dynasty implications of each move. So Matt, we'll jump right in with your first signing that you want to highlight. This is actually a player who signed before free agency begun, but we didn't really touch upon him that much last show. He is the biggest free agent of 2021. So let's not keep the audience in suspense. Who is it, Matt?
Yeah, it's obviously Dak Prescott re-signing with the Dallas Cowboys on a 4-year, $160 million deal. As you say, we didn't mention Dak Prescott, but I just think because he's such a huge player and as we say, he was going to be a free agent, so I think it only makes sense that we talk about it. And obviously he's being paid and his long-term future's committed with the Cowboys. Constantly one of the top quarterbacks in the league in fantasy, finishes a QB7 in his rookie season, then followed up with a QB10, QB14, and then QB2 in 2019. So, as I say, one of the top quarterbacks in terms of fantasy. And then obviously in 2020, he was on pace for a huge season before going down with that injury in week 5. He was actually on pace for 500 fantasy points. I mean, obviously it was only a 4-game sample size, so I'm not going to get too carried away with those numbers. But if you put it into perspective, that would have been 97 more than the actual QB1. As I say, I'm not going to get too carried away with those numbers, but just goes to show what a great start he made to the season. And it was a disappointment that obviously he went down so early, averaging 420 passing yards in those games. And as well as that, we know he's a top passer, but he's also great on the ground, adds fantasy points constantly on the ground, averaging 300 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns per season before that 2020 season. So, as I say, we always talk about it, Kev, how much we love these running quarterbacks, and Dak's right up there with the best of them. So, all around, just looking forward to having him now cemented with the Cowboys and hopefully there for a long time. The one big concern I'd probably have with Dak is obviously this injury. It was quite a severe one, the ankle injury. I think he's going to be 100% for the 2021 season, but my only concern would be, does it now play on his mind? Obviously, as I say, it's such a serious injury. You do have to think, is he still going to be able to play at the level that he can? Is he still going to have that confidence? So, for you, Kev, obviously, as I say, this long-term deal, does this now solidify Dak as a top quarterback in your dynasty rankings?
I think for me, it's yes and no to this one. He's always been a top 5 QB for me in my dynasty rankings. He's got that perfect cocktail to crush it in Dallas, the elite weapons and the trash defense. So Dak's currently my QB4 in dynasty. He was incredible in 2020. Easily the QB1, like you said, if he would have played all 16, and this would have been the highest fantasy output of all time by any QB. Obviously, it was a small sample size. He could have dropped a little in my rankings if he did leave the Cowboys, but I was convinced that he would get paid and he would stay in Dallas. And his 3 previous top 10 finishes before 2020 were no fluke. I think the re-signing is great, though, although this is likely his peak value before the inevitable breakup of his wide receiver core next offseason. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. Obviously, Amari Cooper, a lot of people talking about how long is he going to stay in Dallas. Michael Gallup, I believe this is his final year of his contract. So, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out beyond 2021. But what do you think, Kev, for 2021? Do you think it gives a boost to all these weapons for Dak now? Obviously, knowing Dak's the long-term quarterback. Do you think the weapons get an uptick now?
Oh yeah, you've got to be happy that Dak's re-signed, and it's going to have a massive boost to his weapons. We've already seen in fantasy that players like CD Lamb have moved back up the rankings with the re-signing of Dak. I know you did that with your rankings and flip-flopped him again with T. Higgins. I mean, having Dak as a starting QB, it's a lot better for your dynasty prospects than a fill-in guy like Garrett Gilbert or Ben DiNucci. I mean, I think the big question for me with Dallas and Dak, it comes back to the weapons that are tied to him and his favourable situation long term. Like you said, Gallup's out of contract and Amari Cooper's got an easy out on his deal after this season. So I think long term, you can only really feel good about CD Lamb out of those 3 wide receivers. They'll likely keep 2, and Lamb will be one of them. But which one goes out of Gallup and Cooper? It's still up in the air. We don't know that. So with CD Lamb, I know you bumped him back up. Where does he currently sit for you now with this Dak news?
Yeah, I've moved him up now to my wide receiver 7. As you mentioned before, I did have him below T. Higgins. I'm one of those guys when I do my rankings, I don't like to try and predict the future because you never know what's going to happen in the NFL. I mean, we all thought that was going to re-sign long term, but you just never know. So for me personally, when I do my rankings, I just do it as it is at that time. Obviously, we didn't know what was happening with Dak, so I did have T. Higgins just above CD Lamb. But obviously now with the news, I had to move him back up above T. Higgins. I know Rich, who was on the pod last week, Dynasty Island, he was loving the fact that I'd apparently seen sense and moved him back above T. Higgins, but I think it's the right thing to do. Obviously, we saw how great CD Lamb was with Andy Dalton, and I mean, we know how great Dak Prescott is, so you've just got to move him up, I think.
Yeah, I think if you've got your dynasty rankings and you're not making adjustments on the fly with new information, then I don't really know what you're doing. I think you need to be feeding every bit of information you can into it, and it's no point having your rankings from the end of last season and keeping them the same until the start of next season, because there's plenty of values to be had or people to move off of if you're just sticking with what you've got and not making moves as such.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with reacting to news. I know a lot of people, they like to vitriol when it's, I had so-and-so higher before all this news broke. But for me, I see no issue with moving your rankings from what you've seen happen in the NFL. I mean, as you say, it makes sense. You can't predict what's going to happen in the NFL. So, yeah, I don't understand why people do that. But, yeah, you've definitely got to be fluid with your rankings.
Absolutely agree with that one. So we started off in the NFC East. We're going to stick in the NFC East with the first guy I want to talk about, which is Curtis Samuel, who signed with Washington football team, a 3-year, $34.5 million deal. It's my favourite sign of free agency so far. I love it both from a real life and a fantasy point of view. Outside of re-signing with the Panthers, this was my number one landing spot for Samuel, who reunites with his old coach Ron Rivera and the exciting OC Scott Turner. Samuel was actually the wide receiver 25 last season, and I still think there's room to grow. He's only 24 years old, and he can expect a better target share than he did in Carolina. So, as we know, Samuel's a diverse weapon used all over the formation, and that added rush ability makes him more game script proof as well when they do get a lead. Also, he's an extremely efficient receiver, the wide receiver 2 in catch rate last season. Again, ideal if receiving volume is lower than expected on any given game. Then there's the X factor of Ryan Fitzpatrick, who we all love for fantasy purposes. So, yeah, I know you're a big Curtis Samuel fan. Does this signing hurt any of the other weapons in Washington, though?
I think it does. I think you have to say it does. One, we'll start, at the running back, Antonio Gibson. I think it could have a slight knock on Antonio Gibson. As you just mentioned, we know what a great playmaker Samuel is. We know that he can be a great rusher as well as a receiver. So it's going to be interesting to see how they utilize Samuel alongside Gibson. I obviously still think Gibson's going to get his load on in terms of rushing, but it's going to be interesting to see how the receptions play out. And then obviously mentioning that J.D. McKissick as well, it's going to be really interesting to see how his role now plays out in 2021, as I say, with Samuel being able to be used as a pass catcher and around the backfield. And I just think for me, it's got to hurt J.D. McKissick, I think, in terms of what he's going to produce in 2021. And then if we go to wide receiver, McLaurin, I actually think it's a good thing for McLaurin. We know how good a deep threat he is. Somebody like Samuel in the short routes is definitely going to open things up. And as you say, with Ryan Fitzpatrick there, we spoke about it last week. It's going to be wheels up for a guy like McLaurin, I think. And then obviously Logan Thomas as well. We mentioned him last week. It could potentially hinder that. I'm not the biggest Logan Thomas fan, so this has just added fuel to the fire for me that I don't want any part of him. If I can sell him at value, I'm definitely doing it. So, yeah, that's how I see it play out. Kev, what do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, a big loser is JD McKissick. I think first of all, just because of that short game usage, we're expecting Gibson to take a jump in that game. Now he's in his second season. And also this signing of Curtis Samuel eat into that as well. I tend to agree actually that it will affect Logan Thomas, who he was a fine player last season, but he was very much volume dependent. And I think if he's getting less volume, he's not going to be anywhere near as effective. You wouldn't say he's the most explosive tight end out there. It's kind of interesting with McLaurin. I can see it from both sides how he's going to get less volume, but he's going to have less attention as well. So I'm intrigued to find out a little bit more about your thoughts on Samuel and McLaurin together. Do you think there's a chance they can both be top 25 wide receivers in 2020 and beyond?
I hope so. I think it's going to be interesting. Obviously, we know how great that defense is. So is Fitzpatrick going to be asked to throw it as much as we know he can do? I mean, there's every chance now that they cap that amount that he throws it, and obviously it needs to be a bit more of a game manager. Has he got that in him? I'm not so sure. We know how much he loves to sling it downfield, but that would be my only concern, talking about being able to carry both of these guys as top 25 wide receivers. But just how Samuel's used, I think he's definitely going to get his fair share. As I say, it is a great landing spot. I think it's great in terms of real life and in terms of in the NFL. I think it's a great landing spot. But yeah, I do believe it can be great for fantasy as well. As you said, I'm a big Samuel fan, so I'm hoping it's that way anyway. But McLaurin as well, I think he's definitely undervalued. And I think he's definitely going to be top 25 now that he's got an upgrade at quarterback and get somebody like Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, to be honest, before this move or before sort of reviewing this last season, I was pretty low on Curtis Samuel. I felt that he was a bit of a gadget player, and he really needed situation more than most. I know we've spoke about fading situation, thinking about talent, especially in Dynasty, but I think with his style of play, it was important he did get a better landing spot than most. I'm fully on board now. I've gone full circle. Like I said, new information's come in, and I've moved him up my rankings. So,
and there's nothing wrong with that, Kev.
There's nothing wrong with that, is there? It doesn't make me a bad person or wrong. I am wrong on quite a few things, but I think I'm right that Samuel will have a quality 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what his role is, though, because just mentioned with Ron Rivera, but when they were in Carolina, I know in that last year before Rivera left, Samuel's been used a bit more of a deep threat. So, I mean, we've seen what he can do on the shorter routes and in the backfield. It's going to be interesting to see if Rivera does now use him in that role that we know he can be used, or do we start seeing him taking a few more deep balls, which is obviously great for potential upside. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how he's used.
Indeed, it will. I'll be watching very closely. I was on the Fantasy Nightcap podcast, which we recorded this weekend. It's due to drop sometime next Monday, I believe. So I actually made a bold prediction regarding Curtis Samuel, but I'm going to leave it at that as a bit of a tease. But be sure to check out the Fantasy Nightcap next Monday to find out what I said.
Yeah, it's nice to have you on board this hype train, Kev.
Indeed it is. So, trying not to sound like an NFC East only show. But next guy I've got up, it's another wide receiver in the NFC East, and I can tell by you, Matt, you're pretty good for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I had to talk about this one. It's obviously Kenny Golladay arriving with my New York Giants 4-year deal, $72 million. Arguably the biggest name in free agency, and he's now got a new home in New York. So as a fan, I'm absolutely delighted with this move. In terms of football, I think it's huge for the New York Giants. We've now got a true alpha and obviously a new weapon for Daniel Jones. And in fantasy, I think Golladay is one of arguably the top wide receivers in terms of fantasy. He's averaged 13.3 fantasy points per game throughout his career. Obviously struggled in 2020 with his injuries, but I think he'd have played 4 games last year pretty much, and he averaged 16.5 fantasy points per game in just those 4 games. So it goes to show that he's one of the top guys. In 2019, he ranked 4th in total air yards, 6th in average target distance, 6th in yards per reception, 7th in contested catches. I mean, basically any kind of big play start, Galladay's right up there. So for me, I'm extremely excited, as you can tell, about this one. And it is a QB's best friend. I mean, with the ability he's got, as I say, with that contested catch, he's basically going to bail out your quarterback with the ability to make those catches. And I'm not implying that Daniel Jones is a bad quarterback and he needs bailing out, but it's going to be great to have somebody like Golladay where he can just throw it up, and more likely than not, Galladay's going to come down with it. So, as I say, I'm just ecstatic.
You're buzzing, aren't you? Yeah.
I am. I'm absolutely buzzing. Obviously, the Giants do have other needs. The O-line is obviously a massive one, and it's no point having these kind of players if we can't get Jones the time to find them. But I do now think with the move that we've made in this offseason and in free agency, we now seem to be heading towards that targeting an O-lineman in the first round, or potentially a wide receiver as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see us take somebody like Waddle, and I think if he's there at 11, I think it's going to be hard to pass up on a guy like that. But as I say, if we address that O-line, I think I'm just excited, Kevin. It makes a change being a Giants fan and actually starting to get a little excited about this upcoming season. But I'll move it on to you now, Kev. I'll let you talk a little bit about this move. How do you see it affecting his fantasy value, obviously, moving on from Detroit and arriving in New York?
I don't think I've ever seen that animated match. That's quite brilliant. I mean, first off, I want to say I think Golladay is a great fit for the Giants from a real life point of view, giving him a true alpha. They've not had one since Odell Beckham was there. And like you said, he's a deep threat who's great in the contested catch, which it meshes really well with Daniel Jones, actually, which a lot of people don't realise he's pretty good on the deep ball. Last year he was 5th in danger plays, which is a metric that's all about throwing it up and giving you guys a chance to make a play. And he was also 7th in deep ball completions in 2020. So, like I said, it matched up really well with Galladay's skill set. And then looking back, Golladay was a wide receiver 9 in 2019, and he was on this pace as well in the 4 games he played in 2020. But my biggest concerns about Golladay are the QB and pass volume. So I think whilst Daniel Jones has the potential to make the leap with all this talent around him, I think his personal talent is closer to Drew Lock than Galladay's old QB Matt Stafford. So honestly, he's
ouch.
I mean, you just got to look at the situation, haven't you, from last season? Drew Lock was thrown about all these weapons and he failed. I'm not saying that I think Daniel Jones will fail, but I think talent-wise, just looking at him in a vacuum, he's a lot closer to Drew Lock than Matt Stafford for me, just on a talent basis. I also think the Giants won't be passing as much as Detroit did due to their superior defense. And plus, I think there's a lot more target competition in New York. So for Galladay's fantasy production, I can't actually see him hitting that top 10 ceiling he achieved in Detroit. I think he will be great in real life, but thinking purely from a fantasy side, I can't see him reaching the top 10. The flip side is that he was the wide receiver 11 in starts back in August. So he's currently going as the wide receiver 25 right now. So I expected ADP to rise to that 15 to 20 range after this signing. I won't be taking him at wide receiver 15, though, if he does end up there. But anything after wide receiver 20, I do think he is a shout. I do think he can be pretty good for your fantasy team. So with you being a Giants fan, is he now in your top 5 wide receivers, Matt?
No, it is not top 5 for me. I do have him higher than you. I'm going to try and be biased here. Unbiased, sorry, Kev. I mean, you know what I'm like? I actually hate having Giants players in fantasy because I just can't handle the double upset when the Giants are rubbish and my fantasy teams are rubbish. So usually I try and avoid any Giants players. But for me, he's around the wide receiver 14, 15 mark. So around guys like Mike Evans, I think that's where I personally have him. I think pretty similar to guys like Mike Evans. So Yeah, I'm not going to get too carried away, Kevin, and let my Giants bias take over. But I do think he's a little better than wide receiver 20.
Yeah, I think the sensible listeners will go somewhere between me and you on this one. So somewhere in that sort of 70,
yeah. I mean, well, you are an
80.
Eagles fan, Kev, so you're obviously not gonna say too nicer words about Golladay.
No, I'm definitely gonna fade everyone. I mean, but not Curtis Samuel. Definitely not.
Yeah.
Not him. So keeping it on wide receiver, we're actually going to move away from the NFC East, which is a delight for most of the listeners out there. I want to discuss AJ Green, who signed with the Arizona Cardinals. He was a guy that struggled mightily in 2020, but he did get a cheeky $6 million year deal with Arizona. So he got a ton of opportunity last year with the Bengals, 104 targets, which led to him being the wide receiver 12 in air yards. The efficiency was some of the worst I've ever seen for a guy getting this type of volume, though. A laughable 47 receptions, which was 108th in the NFL in wide receiver catch rate. He's not been fantasy relevant since 2018, and he's going to be 33 years old this season. With the deep playability, he's still looking intact with his strong air yards, and he was also wide receiver at 7 in deep targets. Maybe he does have something left in the tank, though. I think it's a really intriguing signing for the Cardinals. They definitely needed to add someone to improve this offense at wide receiver. So I'm not sure if he is the right guy, but they needed to help Kyler out as such. So I want to get your take on this, Matt. Do you think this signing of AJ Green will affect the other wide receivers on the Cardinals? And do you think they'll actually add further weapons around Kyler this offseason?
Do you know what? I actually quite like this AJ Green going to the Cardinals. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins, we know he's going to get his share. He's going to be one of Kyler's top targets again. I've got no concerns at all with Hopkins, but I'm going to say Christian Kirk. I mean, a lot of people are going to slam
it. Oh my God. Not again.
This is going to be the new Sony Michel, this one, Kev. I think I'm getting back on board with Kirk, Obviously, we know Larry Fitzgerald is moving on. And now with Green, obviously, we're going to assume that he's playing on the outside with Hopkins. We're going to see Kirk in the slot now. And for me, Kirk is a far better slot receiver than he is playing on the outside, where he's been forced to play because he's been sat behind Fitzgerald. So I'm going to say it, Kev. He's a potential sleeper and a breakout candidate in 2021 for me. I'm sorry, but and this one you can actually slam me for. If it comes down miserably, you can slam me on this one. But I actually mean this. Not like Sony Michel. This one, I'm going to say it proud. High tempo offense, air raid. I mean, it's great for all guys. It's great for AJ Green as well, I think, and he's definitely got a shot at bouncing back in 2021. I mean, he's no spring chicken, but I think he's going to see plenty of targets. He's going to be the second, maybe third target on this team. And in terms of adding further weapons, I think they could potentially look at tight end, but now I've just said how much I love Kirk. I'm hoping that they don't go for wide receiver, but I could definitely see him going tight end. I mean, I know you're Dan Arnold's biggest fan, so you'll be upset that he's obviously moved on and that space is open. That space has opened up. So yeah, I can see him going after a solid tight end.
Yeah, it was just making me laugh how you were so pumped about Kirk. Then it was making me think about Dan Arnold. You must always have to have that one Cardinals player to
I was never high on Dan Arnold. Don't start with them ones, Kev.
Gosh, you're high on him. Is your doppelganger?
He's not.
One question I've got about the Cardinals, though, I find it quite interesting that Larry Fitzgerald is been released or not re-signed. Mm-hmm. He's not retired yet. What if he comes back to the Cardinals? Is that going to just ruin it for everyone?
Yeah, probably. He does it every year, so it wouldn't surprise me if it happened. I mean, I think it's time he hangs up those cleats, but hey, if he wants to carry on playing, I think he has said that if he does carry on playing, he only wants to play for the Cardinals. So, I mean, now you've mentioned it, I'm getting a bit worried that he's not come out and said that he's retiring.
Just thought it really intriguing that you'd expect a Drew Brees type announcement with a guy that's been there his whole career as such. So, very interesting one to ponder, Matt. Sorry for pumping the brakes on you.
We've not even started yet, and you're already pumping the brakes.
It's not left the station, has it? So we'll move on to this next guy, which I actually wouldn't have minded in Arizona instead of AJ Green. So who's the next guy you want to discuss, Matt?
Yeah, so it's Will Fuller obviously signing with the Miami Dolphins on a 1 year, $10.6 million deal. Fuller was putting up probably his best fantasy season in 2020. He was averaging 17.2 fantasy points per game and on pace for just under 1,300 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns. So, as I say, by far his best season to date. But then obviously getting banned for the performance-enhancing drugs usage, and it just, I think we know why he managed to stay healthy, should we say? But it must have been something special. But as we say, he's with Miami now. Another weapon for Tua Tagovailoa. I feel like the Dolphins are going to add another wide receiver in this draft. I wouldn't be surprised to see him take Jamar Chase early on. But yeah, Fuller is a great deep threat, and in this offense, he's going to always have that potential to be a big play and put up some good numbers in fantasy. So with this move to Miami, Kev, do you see this as a good move in terms of his fantasy value, or do you think his ADP is going to drop? He's currently a wide receiver 39. Is that about right for you, or do you think it might drop a little from that?
I think anytime you move away from an elite QB like Deshaun Watson, it's going to be hard for you to maintain your value or even increase your value. I think Miami's a way better defense than Houston as well, so the volume is going to drop from that perspective as well. But I'm still keen on following Dynasty. He's my wide receiver 34, which is a little bit higher than the ADP of wide receiver 39. As you know, I'm higher on Tua than Fuller is on Peds. The thing I've always liked about Fuller is that explosive ability that you can win a week, that can win you a week. He was, again, number one in yards per target in 2020. I think he immediately becomes the alpha in that offense. If he can avoid the landmine, like you mentioned, of future stud Jamar Chase in the draft, I think he's going to be a fine wide receiver 3 on your fantasy team. My caveat to Fuller, though, is that I'm way more likely to roster him on a contending team than someone in the middle of the road or potential rebuilding, just based on the injury history, and this 1 year deal could land him in a less favourable spot next off-season. What I want to know from you, Matt, is would you prefer the Dolphins to add another wide receiver to help his value, or do you prefer no further additions and for Fuller to be the volume play on the Dolphins?
I definitely think it's going to be interesting. As we say, he's just got that 1 year deal, so it is a prove-it deal. I'm not a big fan of Devontae Parker, so I think even if they do add somebody, for me, I think that's only going to harm Parker rather than Fuller. As you said, I just think Fuller, when he's healthy, he's arguably right up there in talent. It's just the health that's the big issue with Fuller. So I think, yeah, if they do grab somebody, I wouldn't be too against it in terms of for Fuller. I think it's more going to harm Parker. But yeah, if they don't add a wide receiver, then it's even better for Fuller because we know who he's up against. As you say, I think he becomes the top target in this offense. So either way, I'm not too worried about Fuller. It's more Parker for me. What do you think, Kev?
Yeah, I think for Fuller, no more signings, wide receiver, go for the volume. But I've done it again. I've switched this on to Tua, haven't I? I think for Tua, I want as many weapons as possible. I think if Chase goes there, wow. Just if Chase goes there, he's definitely above Joe Burrow for me, without a doubt. So I'm sure the listeners don't want that to happen.
Hey, I'm a fan of Tua as well, Kev. As you say, it's a bit like I just mentioned with Daniel Jones. If Tua does get these weapons, I mean, there's no excuse now for Tua. And I believe he will step up. I believe he's far better than what he showed in that rookie season. Obviously, we know he's coming off the injury and what have you. So I'm definitely still with you, Kev. Still Tua fan, and I think he's going to have a huge 2021.
Yeah, we're Tua smart guys, aren't we, us?
One of your better ones, that Kev. That one of your better ones.
Cheers, mate. Thank you very much. So swiftly moving on after that terrible joke. Next guy I want to talk about is not sounding like I'm repeating myself, but this is another guy that I'd have quite liked on Miami, actually. Juju Smith-Schuster, who re-signed in Pittsburgh, a one-year deal, $8 million. Short-term deal with the Steelers. I don't love it for dynasty, but it helps Big Ben. It hurts everyone else, I think. The only silver lining as a Juju owner is a young dude who gets to test the market again next off-season. I actually acquired him in a league for the pick 113, 2021 draft pick. I'd still take him at that cost, but I'm less smug about it right now. I'm not a huge fan of his usage last year with that low ADOT, but he has flashed earlier in his career that he can be a solid and explosive wide receiver. As a dynasty owner, though, of Juju, I think it could have been a lot worse if he landed on the Ravens in particular, but overall, it is a disappointment for him re-signing in Pittsburgh in the short term. In particular, it pumps the brakes on the talented young receivers that I'm really high on, Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. So what I want to know, Matt, is how far do you think the re-signing of Juju drops these two guys in your dynasty rankings?
Yeah, I mean, it is disappointing, but I'm not going to go too crazy and drop them too far in my rankings. I think, as I say, we didn't want Juju there. We were all hoping both of these guys could have broke out in 2021. You know, I think we're both huge Johnson fans. I know you're really high on Claypool as well.
Whoa.
But as I say, I'm not going to react too much to it because obviously we've seen how they performed in 2020. Johnson finishes the wide receiver 21, despite obviously having those nagging injuries for most of the year, and he pretty much missed 4 games last year. So managing to still finish wide receiver 21, and that was obviously with Juju there. And then Claypool, wide receiver 24, so both top 25 wide receivers while Juju was there. Claypool, obviously a rookie, arguably the wide receiver 3 on the depth chart last year. And yeah, he can definitely develop into a bigger role in 2021. So yeah, I'm not going to get too carried away, Kevin, and start panicking too much. I think it's not too bad for Juju, to be honest. I know you said you don't feel as smug anymore, but I wouldn't be too worried. I think he works better when he's not the alpha, and now we've seen that Claypool, he's definitely got the traits to be an alpha, and obviously Johnson as well. The amount of targets he saw last year and how well he played, I don't think it's too bad, Kev, to be honest. And we know Big Ben, he targeted Juju the most in the red zone out of all the wide receivers. So there's always that as well, that you'd like to think he's going to see his fair share of touchdowns as well. So yeah, I wouldn't panic too much, Kev. I'll try and put your mind at ease a little bit and say I'm not too worried about Juju sticking around in Pittsburgh.
So you mentioned Johnson at wide receiver 21 and Claypool at wide receiver 24. Where does Juju align with those two in your rankings? Is he above those two? Is he in the middle or the lowest ranked?
I have him actually below both of those guys. As I say, I'm a big fan of Johnson. I have him just above Claypool. I think both of those guys are pretty much neck and neck in my rankings. I know they were neck and neck when I did that graphic the other day on Twitter, where I was highlighting both of those guys that were right next to each other in the rankings. So it's hard for me to split them, but I do have Juju just a little bit below. As you say, that ADOT is a bit concerning when you're talking about potential upside. Obviously, somebody like Johnson, I think he's definitely going to get his fair share of targets, and we know that he can make big plays out of them as well. So yeah, just a little bit below, but it's easy to forget that Juju is still pretty young. I believe he's 24 years old, maybe 25. So still got plenty of years left in him yet. And in terms of dynasty, I think he's still a great asset to own. Yeah,
I completely agree. I think working out how you want to rank those 3 Pittsburgh wide receivers and whereabouts in your ranks you want them to be is one of the most interesting and intriguing decisions this offseason, and something that's really going to shape your rankings as well. I think they're all very similar, but yeah, I just wish Juju had gone to make it easy for me to do my rankings pretty much.
I'd have loved it. Yeah, I'd have definitely loved it for Johnson.
So you mentioned Johnson there. I think the sign of these next 2 you want to discuss also affects a different Johnson, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's Mark Ingram and Philip Lindsay, obviously both signing with the Texans. Ingram signed a 1-year, $2.5 million deal. Lindsay a 1-year, $3.25 million deal. So both nothing major in terms of the money, but what has this created over in Houston in terms of that backfield. Obviously, at the beginning of the offseason, David Johnson, he restructured his contract. They released Duke Johnson, RIP Duke Johnson, gutted about that still. But yeah, we thought all the signs were pointing towards DJ being the starter in 2021. I've seen a few people on Twitter saying that he's a nice little late target if you go 0 RB. And to be honest, I were on board with it. He had a great 2020, but now with the addition of Ingram and Lindsay, it's made this backfield a real minefield for me I think. Ingram barely did anything in 2020, obviously sat behind J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards in Baltimore. Lindsay was obviously stuck in that timeshare with Melvin Gordon in Denver, but he was pretty much playing second fiddle to Gordon as the season went on. However, they have both been productive in previous years in terms of fantasy. Ingram was the RB11 in 2019 and Lindsay was the RB19 that same year, so not too many years ago. Both of these guys were pretty solid fantasy producers. But as I say, it's just made this backfield a bit of a minefield for me and a likely committee and probably one that I'm going to avoid if I'm being honest. But how do you see it playing out, Kevin, 2021? Would you be happy to roster any of these guys going into next season?
Yeah, I still think David Johnson is a running back to own in Houston, which tells you a lot about how I view Ingram and Philip Lindsay. I know the Texans are going to be one of the worst teams in football with or without Deshaun Watson, and I can see them being a heavy pass volume offense based on them getting smashed and playing from behind every week. I think David Johnson's a clear pass catching back in town. Ingram's been solid previously, but it looked done in 2020. And Lindsay was conceding passes to the well-known satellite back, Royce Freeman. Can you feel the sarcasm? David Johnson, he's entering his age 30 season, but it's that pass usage that makes him appealing to me and the back to own in 2021. I'm not crazy about him in startups, but he was a top 15 running back in fantasy points per game in 2020. And at running back 42, which is where he's going in startups right now, I actually think it's a steal for anybody that's in win now mode in a dynasty startup that's got an older roster. What's your thoughts on him being running back 42? That feels like a bit of a steal, that.
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't know it was that low, if I'm being honest. I thought it'd have been a lot higher than that. As you say, he's a running back that can do both phases of the game. He's a solid rusher, but as we know, he's arguably one of the top receiving running backs. So yeah, he's definitely got a shot at easily outproducing that ADP. As I say, I didn't realize it was that low. Yeah, I just think it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. Ingram, yeah, he did look toast. But why would they sign both of these guys when they've got DJ? Obviously, we know he does have that injury history. That could have been one of the reasons why. Just playing it safe with two established running backs. Obviously, we know Ingram, he can be solid when needed, but I just say he's not the long-term answer. And Lindsay, as I say, he's shown flashes. But again, he's another guy that's struggled with injuries in his career. So just a real strange one. If I was gonna put my name down to owning one of these guys, it would definitely be DJ out of the three that we've mentioned.
I'm glad you've said that, Matt, because I know you've got a bit of a soft spot for Philip Lindsay, haven't you? You like to... you do. You look him.
You just any. I don't think I've ever said his name until this podcast.
Yeah, you might be right. I think I might just have made that up, but I'm sure it got a laugh from the audience as well.
Yeah,
so,
just any bad player, just say that I'm the number one fan. That just seems to be the way it goes, doesn't it?
I'm sure you've mentioned him before about James Robinson or something. Maybe it's not you.
I must have.
Maybe it's some other smart dude out there that likes him. So keeping it on running backs that are the most inspiring, we've got Jamal Williams next to me. He signed with Detroit on a 2-year, $7.5 million deal. The re-signing of Aaron Jones, it put end to any shot of him re-signing in Green Bay. I genuinely believe that if Jones did leave Green Bay in free agency, that Williams would have outproduced A.J. Dillon in 2021 and beyond. The move to the Lions, I think it is an interesting one. He does slide in behind another running back with a similar size and profile to Aaron Jones in DeAndre Swift. I'm just gutted that Jamal Williams has moved to a dome team away from the wet weather in Green Bay. He famously said playing in the rain makes him feel like a mermaid, like SpongeBob. But all jokes aside, I actually think it's a pretty good landing spot with the Lions, where he'll have some usage and be the clear handcuff for a future top 3 dynasty running back in DeAndre Swift. We've seen that Williams can be pretty decent in all phases of the offense. He's consistently in the running back 3 conversation each season. Now, we know the Lions are a franchise in transition. I'm a huge DeAndre Swift fan, no denying that, but there's a lot of other moving parts on this team with the new QB, Jared Goff, the signing of Jamal Williams, like we said, and also the new wide receiver core. So with the combination of losing Golladay and Marvin Jones, plus the addition of Jamal Williams, how does this affect DeAndre Swift in Dynasty?
I mean, in terms of Williams, I'm not going to say too much about him because I absolutely love Williams. I just say that interview was absolutely hilarious, and I just think he's an absolute lovable guy. But in terms of him affecting Swift, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I mean, were we expecting Swift just to play every single snap? It was never going to happen. So adding somebody like Williams who can do a lot of things, and obviously we know how good he is at receiving. He can run the ball. But as I say, he's just good at those things. He's not a superstar like DeAndre Swift. So for me, I just think he's somebody that's going to be able to fill in and let Swift have a little rest every now and again. And if anything were to happen to Swift, he's a great backup and somebody to fall back on with the traits he has. He's arguably similar to Swift, just a lot lower rate. But the key thing is that you mentioned is Golladay and Jones. I think that is going to be a bit more of an issue when it comes to Swift. Obviously, we've just spoke about Golladay, how amazing Golladay is, and Jones as well. He's been a fantastic player for the Lions. So losing 2 guys like this, you've just got to imagine that all the attention now is going to be focused on Swift and getting to Goff, and that is when it becomes a bit of a concern. But I think with Swift being such a good receiving back, I think he's going to see plenty of receptions this year. And that's always going to be great in terms of fantasy. So I'm not panicking if I'm a Swift owner. I think he is going to see a pretty large workload, to be honest, in 2021. I do think he's going to see the ball plenty. So I'm not panicking too much. It's just he's likely going to face 1 or 2 extra defenders around that box, I think.
Yeah, it's just so strange, isn't it, on Twitter when there's clearly a guy signed as a backup that's not a threat to the touches, a bit like Marlon Mack signing in Indianapolis. I think what do people want? Do they want Swift to have 30 touches a game? Because if he's getting 30 touches a game, he's not going to be effective. He's similar to Alvin Kamara for me in the sense that getting 15 rushes and 5 catches, and that's going to really maximize his value. I think this move's also really nice in the sense that, like you said, they are similar players, so don't have to mess about with game plans or anything like that. They can stick one guy in to spell Swift when he's needing a breather. And like you said, in this offense, if he does end up getting some time, if Swift gets injured, he can be pretty viable. I don't know if he'd be an RB1 just based on the Lions being a potentially poor team, but if something did happen, Swift is a starter in your lineups, no doubt, and he'd easily be the bell cow on that team if there was an injury to Swift. Hopefully not though, because Swift's amazing.
Yeah, we definitely don't want that. Just following up from what we spoke about last week with handcuffs, if we're talking about Jamal Williams, he's arguably one of the better ones to own, I think. As we've just mentioned, because he's so similar to Swift, I think he'll fall in great into this offense if anything were to happen to Swift. And he's got potential to, as you say, it can be an RB1 in fantasy if anything were to happen to Swift, just because of his ability. So, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of having handcuffs, but Williams is definitely somebody that I'll probably target later on in drafts. Yeah,
I think that's a wise strategy. And if you've got Williams on your rosters already, if you've been handcuffing Aaron Jones, for example, you're happy that he's managed to land in a good spot where he will see that playing time with upside for more. Yep. So next up, Matt, we're moving away from running backs. We're talking about, is it our first tight end of the show?
Yeah, and trust
You're
it
a
to
big
be me
fan,
to trust it to be me to bring up a tight end. But yeah, it's Gerald Everett, obviously signing with the Seattle Seahawks, just a 1 year, $6 million deal. But Everett's finally getting away from that horrible timeshare that he had with Tyler Higbee with the LA Rams. He's an athletic tight end, and he's a former second round pick as well. A lot of people forget how highly he was drafted in 2017. He's shown flashes in previous years when he's had the opportunity in LA, but never really been able to string it together. Obviously, competing with those touches with Higbee, but he gets a fresh start with the Seahawks. He was obviously going to be behind Metcalf and Lockett in terms of looks, but beyond that, Seattle, they don't really have much, do they, in terms of pass catching weapons. So I just think with how much of a mess the tight end position is in fantasy, he may have a big enough role to actually be fantasy relevant, I think, going into 2021. I'm not going to go too crazy on him. I mean, as we said, tight ends are a complete minefield when it comes to fantasy. But I just think with that lack of depth chart behind Metcalf and Lockett, there's a sneaky chance that it could see. But it could easily be a tight end one just because of how poor the position is. So what do you think, Kev? Do you think he has any relevance going into 2021?
I mean, I do like Gerald Everett as a raw talent, but I hate the Seahawks tight end usage. It always seems like they've got 3 or 4 guys every year that get involved at different times based on different matchups. With Pete Carroll seemingly intent on running the ball even more in 2021, it just eats into that pass volume pie even more. Plus, like you said, they've got 2 very good receivers, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. If you could guarantee that Everett is going to be the clear tight end though and get 90 targets, I'd be all over it. He's been splitting with Tyler Higbee all of his career. And I do love his athletic metrics coming out. He was touted as a Jordan Reed type prospect. But he has been disappointing. I think he's averaging less than 11 yards per catch over the last 3 years, which doesn't really fit with this explosive narrative. I still think he can be fantasy relevant though. Like you said, the tight end landscape, it's an absolute dumpster fire in it. I think all you've got to do is catch maybe 50, 60 balls and you're a tight end 1. So at his current cost of tight end 27, I'm on board with this as a tight end 3 with upside, but I've no doubt he's going to start creeping up into the top 20s, maybe even inside the top 20. So if he does get beyond that point, I won't be interested anymore. But would you be comfy taking him as a top 20 tight end in your startups? I know you... Every league's a tight end premium for you, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, you've always got to get plenty of tight ends, Kev.
Love it.
I mean, I wouldn't hate it. I mean, there's a guy that throughout his career is somebody that I've always had at least on one roster because I do believe in his talent. So, as I say, it's just great that he's managed to get out of that timeshare with Higbee. I think Will Dissly's still with the Seahawks, so it's potentially going to be a shootout between those 2 guys. We've seen the upside that Dissly's had before, but I just think Everett it was a great prospect coming into the NFL. I think in terms of a tight end that's got that athleticism. So I think he's got upside, and there's taking him in the top 20. I mean, once you get beyond the top 3, really, it just becomes a bit of a throw a dart and hope it lands in the right target. So. Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to take a shot on him round about that tight end 20 mark because you could pick anyone. It's just like playing roulette. You don't know, do you, what's going to happen?
And you should always listen to advice from Matt about tight ends because you actually did a bit of research last season about ADP and tight ends and made some predictions with the Astronauts. And I believe you was the best, wasn't you? You was the man when it came to predicting tight end in fantasy.
You know me, Kev, I'm humble. I don't like to brag about stuff like that, but yes, I was. No, yeah, we did a bit of research. Obviously, we did the rankings with the Astronauts, and I managed to smash ADP on all positions, Kev. I outperformed ADP on every position. So, I mean, I'm not one to brag, Kev, but I mean, you've got yourself a great co-host. That's all I'm going to say.
Why has Rich rejoined?
Oh God, no.
Oof. No, I think just building on what you've said. Obviously, you know your tight ends really well. I'm pretty decent as well. I think the only advice I'd give about tight end is if it's not the top 3, then just fade the position and take dart throws late on. And Everett's a guy that's ideal for that sort of strategy as a late guy. Just don't be going for guys in the middle, because you're just going to end up burn. It's so rapid is the tight end landscape, which I think we'll be doing in a couple of weeks' time. We'll have a look at the tight end landscape in more detail, but. Yeah, either go early or go late, as Rich Cooling said on our last show last week.
Yeah, that's it. As you say, if you don't get those top three, there's no need to reach for a tight end beyond that.
Indeed, you are right, Matt. So next up, we've got a guy I want to discuss, a QB, Andy Dalton, signing with the Chicago Bears, 1 year, $10 million deal. For me, it was one of the strangest moves of free agency so far. He got the $10 million contract, yet the former starter and, in my eyes, better QB, Mitch Trubisky, was signed by the Bills for just $3 million. It just feels like a team with no plan or direction and constant poor decision making. The Bears have also been sniffed around Mr. Unlimited Russell Wilson and could still be interested in trading for him. Back to Dalton, though, he was vastly underwhelming on a loaded Cowboys offense in 2020. Then looking back further in his career, he was the QB4 back in 2013 with the Bengals, but that was a huge outlier in his career. He's failed to crack the top 10 in any other season. So, I mean, with the Bears, I think they're extremely unpredictable as to what they're going to do, if they're going to touch the QB spot, if not. So, I'll throw it back to you, Matt. Will Andy Dalton be the week 1 starter? And if he is, what can he be for fantasy in 2021?
I think he will be. I mean, first off, if you're a Bears fan, you're absolutely gutted, I think, with this one. As you say, we had talks of Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, all these top quarterbacks. Even Dak Prescott, I think, got mentioned a couple of times before he got signed with the Cowboys. So you hear all these names at quarterback, and who do you get? You get Andy Dalton. So, yeah, I wouldn't be too happy if I was a Bears fan. I do think he'll be the starter. I mean, he is a veteran quarterback. The Bears probably see him as a solid quarterback to rely on. It feels a little bit actually like Nick Foles, obviously, when he joined last year. You thought an all reliable. They feel like they've gone the same route again, getting Andy Dalton. So, yeah, I think he will be the starter in week 1. It's going to be interesting to see what they do behind Andy Dalton. But, yeah, in terms of fantasy, you just mentioned it last year. I mean, with how poor he looked on as you say, a stacked offense like he had with the Cowboys, what are we expecting with the Bears? I mean, they've got, obviously, Allen Robinson's re-signed, so that's a great. Darnell Mooney as well. I know we both like Darnell Mooney, but, I mean, it's nothing compared to what he had with the Cowboys, and he's struggled with the Cowboys. So, in terms of fantasy, I don't think it's great. Allen Robinson is probably going to see his fair share again, so, I mean, that's good. But in terms of just Dalton in general, I'm not feeling this one at all, Kev.
Yeah, I've not got a ton to add on Dalton, to be honest. I missed getting him in a league. He was on waivers. I then spoke to a guy who tried trading me him, and I said, "There's absolutely no chance." I'd take him for free in existing leagues, but I wouldn't be paying anything for him. I'm not convinced he will be the starter. I mean, I don't even know what the Bears are doing. It's just a mess. How did they get in the playoffs last season with that leadership? I'll never know. Yeah, enough Andy Dalton, because he's making me sad.
Yeah, we can't really talk much about Dalton, can we? There's not much to say on it.
He's like the rubbish gift you get on Christmas Day, and you think you're getting something mint, and you open that box and you've got that red rifle in there. So yeah, we'll move on to the next guy you want to discuss, Matt. Get us back happy.
Well, it's not getting me too happy. It's Kenyon Drake, obviously re-signing, obviously joining the Raiders on a 2-year, $11 million deal. Coming off that hugely disappointing 2020 season. I know I say it hugely because I had Drake in loads of leagues and he absolutely killed me last year. We were all expecting that potential huge season from Drake. Obviously, we saw what he did with the Cardinals in 2019, showing that upside that he had when he joined them mid-season, where he averaged just under 20 fantasy points per game. He was the RB4 over the final 9 games of the season. So leading into 2020, I, like many others, were getting really excited about Drake on that offense, but didn't turn out that way. He did finish the RB16, but it did not feel like that at all. He had 6 games where he failed to hit double-digit fantasy points and just became unreliable. And I absolutely hated having him at the end, having him on my fantasy rosters. So, yeah, it was a huge fall from grace. And now he's obviously joined the Raiders, and he's going to be playing alongside Josh Jacobs. I mean, neither of us are a huge Josh Jacobs fan, Kev, but I mean, I can't see Drake beating out Josh Jacobs. I think it's just going to become a bit of a commit. Okay. Well, we might talk about that a little later on, but
here we go.
It is going to be interesting to see how this backfield plays out. For me personally, I just see Drake as the change of pace back, and he's probably going to see the third down work. Is obviously we've seen what he can do in the receiving game, and obviously we've seen what Josh Jacobs doesn't do in the receiving game. So I just think that's going to be as well for me personally. But yeah, what do you think, Kev? You just give us a little sneak then. What do you feel about Drake's arrival, and how does it affect Josh Jacobs' value?
It crushes his value for me. I know weirdly there's loads of Josh Jacobs truthers out there, but anyone that's seeing this as a positive or still eye on Jacobs is experiencing take lot for me. He's already a 2-down guy who's been living off rush volume and touchdown efficiency. Plus, the Raiders have lost 4 starting offensive linemen in free agency, and now this sign of Drake, it's just like you said, the nail in the coffin for me. Like you said about Drake, though, Matt, it was a phenomenal end to 2019, and despite a disappointing 2020, it was still a solid running back too. If you look at the overall numbers, I know, like I said, it didn't feel like it, but running back 16, it's nothing to be, nothing to sort of fade, is it? Really, it's pretty decent. Yeah, this signing is a huge blow to Jacobs' value. We know Drake, he's pretty competent in all facets of the game. He's had multiple 50-catch seasons. He's hit 8 touchdowns in both the last 2 years. This is where it gets a bit interesting, Matt. I don't think it's crazy to suggest that Drake outscores Jacobs in 2021. I think that is in the range of outcomes. I'm not saying he will. He absolutely shouldn't, but if the O-line is that bad and they are playing from behind because they can't move the ball, I'd much rather take Drake at his cost than Jacobs at his easily. Like we said, the Jacobs, he was going around the back end running back 1 range, but for me, he's dropped massively these past 2 weeks. I wouldn't touch him until around running back 20 now. Am I feeding off my bias against Jacobs, or has he massively dropped for you as well?
I mean, I'm not his biggest fan, as you know, Kev. I'm not huge on Josh Jacobs. Ever since I took N'Keal Harry before him in that rookie draft that I keep banging on about, I've never liked him. So, yeah, I think it does have to drop, as you say. I mean, Drake can do it all. He is a really solid running back. I know I've just slammed him for what he did for me last year in fantasy, but as a player, he is a very good player. And yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it plays out. You've got to say that it's going to affect Jacobs now. Any hope that he did have that he was going to be seeing a bit of receiving work, I think that's well and truly gone now with Drake there. So yeah, I think you've got to move him down. It's going to be interesting to see just how much it does affect his ADP and how much it slides down. But yeah, I'm like you, Kev. I won't touch him until RB20 either. I think that's about where I'd take him as well. Yeah.
Is it fair to say that Josh Jacobs' dynasty value is cream crackered?
Yes, I like it.
Get in. Jacobs. That's for always putting points on me when you play me in fantasy. As for that. So I got that off my chest. Next up, it's another guy that does pretty well against me when he plays against me in my dynasty leagues. It's Chris Carson, who re-signed with the Seattle Seahawks, 2-year, $14.6 million deal. Easily Chris Carson's best landing spot for me, the team that took him in the 7th round of the 2017 draft. Over his career, he's more than repaid that faith in fantasy, though, with 3 top 20 seasons. And he's actually improved his fantasy points per game every year, which links into the increased pass usage he's received. It looks set to be a run-heavy Seattle team in 2021 and less of the let Russ cook narrative. But yeah, I still see it as a muddy backfield, though. We know Pete Carroll's infatuated with adding a running back every off-season, so there's no doubt that more competition is incoming. Plus, there's the return of Rashad Penny, who saw 11 touches in Seattle's final 3 games of 2020, coming off a major knee injury. So what do you think, Matt? How do you see this backfield playing out in 2021? And sadly, is the Rashad Penny dream over?
I feel like it is, Kev. and it kills me to say it. Linda were taking the absolute mick out of me on Twitter when the news broke. She was absolutely slamming me because I keep mentioning that I think Penny's going to bounce back. Obviously, we thought Carson were going to leave, and I'm just like you, Kev, a huge Penny fan, and I was getting excited about the potential of him being the lead guy for the Seahawks. But yeah, I think that dream has gone. How I see it playing out, I think it goes back to what it was like a couple of years ago, where I think Carson's probably going to see the bulk of the work, and hopefully Penny gets used. Obviously, he's coming off that huge injury, so I didn't expect much last year when he came back, and obviously we didn't see much from him, so that wasn't a surprise to me. But yeah, I do think he's still going to get used alongside Carson, and obviously they've got DJ Dallas as well, so it's going to be interesting to see how he gets used as well. But yeah, I think the dream's over, mate. I think we've got to let that ship sail away.
I'm just thinking, do I switch my allegiance and start going after Chris Carson now? Because
yes, you'd join me.
I think
you're Curtis Samuel now, anyway, Kev.
I know. I think stubbornly over the past few years, because I've been such a Rashad Penny truther, I've always seemed to fade Chris Carson just because I do find it hard to be high on two guys from the same running back field. It's going to be tough to get off Rashad Penny just in case he does have that inevitable breakout. But now that Carson's got this 2-year security and he has proven he's been a top 20 guy last 3 seasons, I think he's pretty solid for Dynasty now, especially on win now teams. He's going to be a more than competent running back too. He won't be anybody's running back one, will he? So yeah, it's cracking news for Chris Carson, and just a shame about Rashad Penny. Hopefully he can bounce back from the injury and maybe rehab his value somehow and get a move next off season. That's all I'm hoping for, I guess.
Yeah, it's always been a shame because he shows flashes, doesn't he, as well, Penny? He always shows them flashes, and then something goes wrong, and you can't see the field. And yeah, it's been a tough few years being a Penny true fan, Kev.
Yeah, I'm just gutted. Just gutted for Rashad Penny. He definitely stands out like a sore thumb in my running back model. So yeah, it would have been nice to see him break out, but never mind. There's still time.
We can always hope.
He just might be on his second team.
Yeah.
Right then. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. We've recapped the second wave of free agency plus Dak Prescott, and we've also looked at all the dynasty implications from free agency. So thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Wildcard. We also have our Linktree site on our Twitter page where you can find all of our podcasts and shows on YouTube. Again, please check it out and do subscribe. And join us next Tuesday, the 30th of March, where we welcome the fantastic Dynasty Grill to discuss his post-free agency buys and sells in Dynasty. That'll be a smoking hot show, no doubt. Yeah. Plus, we've also got a massive announcement next week. So please do tune in, and you'll get to witness some fantastic news for us here at the Fantasy Wildcard. So
yeah, a bit giddy there, Kev, weren't you?
Honestly, I nearly splurted it out. But,
I know. I can't wait to get this one out there. I'm the same, Kev. I've been holding on to this secret for dear life, trying to stop it slipping out.
I know. We just got to keep it on the down low for now. But next Tuesday, 30th March, be sure to check it out. So yeah, thanks once again. Hope you have a good one, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.